There's so many people that will lay down 50, I mean, this is no exaggeration, 50 guitar tracks, and then when it comes time to mix, they're like overwhelmed with all of these different options. Instead of like, where should we stay in Florida, it becomes, where should we stay in the universe? Limitation is one of the most important elements of style.
Is that where the kind of a trust factor develops between you and the people you're working with on the album, and like making sure that they're kind of in the same place as far as not overworking the album?
Well, I make an effort to work with people that I know I can trust, and then you develop the trust. I mean, you develop the working trust. There are people in the recording industry that will like be working with a band, and the engineer will say, "Hey, I'll buy everybody a pitcher of beer. Let's go and take a break." And 6 hours later, he might have spent $30, but the band has spent $600 worth of time drinking $30 worth of beer. So it's that kind of a trust environment. When you're first working with people, it's like, okay, does this studio have a good reputation of like being hardworking? And then the working relationship where you find people like, after a while, they know how you like something mic'd up, or when they should stop pursuing a tangent because they know that you're only entertaining their notion for the sake of being polite or being egalitarian about it. I mean, you got to, even though it's your own project, if somebody comes in, if somebody like your engineer, if you're working, one artist, one engineer, you gotta trust, you gotta entertain their flights of fantasy, because sometimes they might be right. And that's where you always have the choice of continuing to work with somebody or working with somebody again. Ultimately the results are what speak of that result the most clearly.
I guess I'm talking about results. If you had to pick like two or three things that you felt like described this album versus any of the other stuff you've done, how would you think it's set apart from your other work? Or do you think it's just kind of a variation on a theme of things you've done in the past?
Or not a variation of a theme, but different themes being presented. I mean, it's like, hopefully each time you go into the studio, you know a little bit more than the last time. And there's, that can be a positive, that can be a negative. I mean, sometimes you experiment with something and it doesn't work, but if you would have tried it one more time, it might have worked. And you never know those things. And so you can't go in there and say, "I'll never double vocals again," never, and never saying never is there are people that have a hard time if they've recorded 90% of the tracks. They will want to play the other 10% just so that it can all be them. And if anything, just for the sake of not entering into that trap, I will almost make sure that somebody else comes in, because, if they're not doing it better, at least they'll be doing it quicker.
Okay.
And there's nothing wrong with making other people happy as well as yourself. The advantage of multi-track recording is the bass player and the drummer and the guitar player can all have the same feel because it's the same person. And so, of course, there's less like rehearsal time necessary. Bands should never have to rehearse in the studio. They should always be prepared before they go into the studio. And that's where I see things like, the different quick methods of recording, such as Pro Tools and the different computer methods. I mean, they might end up sounding just as, nearly just as good or whatever, but because there's no confinement, it's kind of like being a fish. If you're a fish, you are a fish.
And I guess one of the things that you brought up that I thought was interesting, kind of talking about like putting like a human element back into music, is you said one of the tracks on the album you tried to record in Montreal and you couldn't do it just because they didn't really get
the cultural difference.
Mm-hmm.
And we might be seeing a diminished amount of happiness in listening to music. I had somebody who was actually an audio designer. I couldn't exactly understand the technology he was talking about, but the emotive response that is coming from all digital, on digital, played back by digital, is nowhere near like listening to the same music being performed live or recorded analog, or just because of the sound spectrum, things that are missing from it.
Do you think that's one of the drives behind releasing this album on vinyl, not exclusively CD?
Well, the primary drive behind that is I prefer listening on vinyl. Good News was the first record that I ever made that didn't, initiate on vinyl. There is a linear continuity where, like, I can be in the same rack as a 50-year-old Louis Armstrong record that is shaped the same way, that is played on the same equipment, and there's a it's more like belonging to the ages to be on a similar format. And there's some scary things that can happen with all this format changing and like things becoming obsolete. Each time a format change comes along, there's less and less old stuff that gets pulled into the new technology. And so sooner or later, it might take 100 years, but sooner or later that Louis Armstrong might not be able to be heard because nobody converted the sound into, whatever that future format might be. Psychic stereo.
Did you have any more questions about the album? Anything else coming up?
I don't think you've talked about how the visual art for the album plays in with...
Well, there's a... what started out as a map of the solar system, a map of the sun, the earth, and a few stars that depicts how the sun actually bends light as it is seen. It's the redshift that proved Einstein's theory of relativity. But I was playing around with these different transparencies of art, and the solar map landed right next to this picture of Otto Lilienthal, the glider pioneer, and I just thought, oh wow, these look good together. And then I realized there's the sun and there's a man with wings, and it's like, okay, that's Icarus. And just refine the package, put my name on it, and it's black and white. And I've been playing with the idea that since the title is Hot Wax, in reference to the melting wings of Icarus, that since it's black and white cover, to maybe have a coloring contest where people can take wax crayons and color the record cover, and then get a prize.
Win a dinner with Grant Hart.
Win dinner with Grant Hart, but on you. Buy dinner for Grant. Win dinner with me.